Welcome to Canvas of the Heart, presented by Free Arts for Abused Children of Arizona. The mission of Free Arts is to transform children's trauma to resilience through the arts. This show is a collection of conversations that spotlight the ways Free Arts creates hope for children and teens who've experienced abuse, neglect, or homelessness. We hope you find this show to be informative, inspiring, and fun. All right, we're back. We're back with Beth. That's important. Beth is now this is your third appearance. Yep. You're up on the leaderboard right now.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're here to do that and wear the title proudly.
I will.
Okay. Well, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
Good. How's Program Manager World?
Program Manager World always has lots of things happening in it, but It's always a good time.
What are you most excited about happening in programs right now?
We are gearing up for our holiday season, which is one of the busier times of years for Free Arts. Not that there is a slow time, really, truly. But that is a special time when kiddos are looking for stuff to do. Their adults are looking for things for kiddos to do. Folks are a lot more focused on giving back and connecting with their community at large. So there's everything from volunteering to art supply drives to events for children. So lots of stuff coming up. Convergence
of many different energies happening there. Yeah. And then I think it times well for young people because this could be a challenging time.
Yes. So. There is the flip side for sure, which is if you're living in out-of-home care and you're not connected with feelings of home and family, it can be really tough. But the silver lining is that means it's extra important for our mentors and our teaching artists to be in those spaces.
Excellent. So today we are talking about treasure hunting, and we're going to explain what that is. We're going to talk about some short examples of what it looks like, what it sounds like. Then we'll do some true-to-life scenarios that happen in and around free art spaces to kind of provide examples of what treasure hunting is. And then we'll give people some ideas on how they could try this. So this is a skill. The inspiration of this in full transparency is I recently had an opportunity to train again with some of our new mentors, and treasure hunting is definitely part of our training. And it's always great to get live feedback about how easy it is to understand what we're going for here and how it applies. And so I always think there's more and more examples that people can get and become more accustomed to and then even use in their own life. So treasure hunting is how we're going to kick off this recent run of podcast episodes. And I'm glad, Beth, that you're here to help us with it.
Thank you for having me.
So when I think about treasure hunting and people who talk about it and understand it and are excited, you're number one on the list. So 3P and number one. So thanks, Beth.
Thank you.
All right. So let's give a little background on treasure hunting. So we are definitely working with concepts that are intentionally shifting language about how we talk about people. So when I first heard about the concept of treasure hunting, it was from an organization called Kids at Hope that was inspired and led by Rick Miller for a long period of time. And Kids at Hope is definitely a nod to this time period where we used to refer to certain populations of young people as at risk. And that's a little less common now, although we understand that there are some risk. And the trouble with this was that it was just labeling a group of people who need support as with a negative label. And so how do we think about the potential, the growth? And so it was pretty influential at the time. And I think for a lot of youth-serving social service agencies, they started to adopt similar language, realizing, oh yeah, we don't mean to convey something about the audience that's essential to them. We're here to serve a population. We're trying to indicate that in some meaningful way to funders, to volunteers and such. But Rick Miller was very influential, and the Kids at Hope methodology was all about recognizing the potential for and the experience of success from any child. So one of their kind of taglines, I hope I don't butcher it, was all children are capable of success, no exceptions. that no exceptions is a pretty bold statement, because if you're, a teacher, you're in a nonprofit space, you're working with young people that may not be that thrilled to come to your program, like that no exceptions thing can feel pretty far away. And so treasure hunting is, in a nutshell, the adult work. It can be peer-led too, which we'll talk more about later, but it's largely here for our purpose in talking to free arts people, volunteers, and mentors. It's the activity we do in our program as we're interfacing with people where we're looking for that capability of success and with a flexible definition around success. And some of the difficulties that Rick noted in a lot of his work had to do with the fact that if we have enough barriers when we're young, we could start to feel really trapped there. And we can start to lose a little bit of hope, a little bit of a sense that things can be different and that we could do things that have any influence on our future. And so Rick was definitely somebody who helped provide, or Kids at Hope methodology was definitely something that created more language for people to talk about and introduced this really essential concept of treasure hunting. And so in a nutshell, and I'd like you to talk about it in your definition, your understanding as well. But treasure hunting is looking into the person you're working with and looking for what's good, what's strong, what are characteristics about them that can help them take the next step. How does treasure hunting, show up for you? How do you describe it to others?
Ooh, I think the way I describe it to others is occasionally when you're working with other human beings, they're going to present you with some behavior that feels a little less than stellar. I feel like this will come up a lot with the holidays around the corner for a lot of people in a lot of different worlds. So it's looking at that and then looking past that to the person underneath and what they might be thinking or feeling or need, but also what is great about them, what good place is some of that coming from.
Yep. So treasure hunting is a shift in working with people. So it's clearly part of what we do at Free Arts. It's been part of our language and our approach for a long time, and it's different than others. So I'd like your thoughts on this, but it definitely emphasizes strengths over a deficit approach. So how does that show up in the way we engage at Free Arts?
Ooh, it shows up in all kinds of ways. It's kind of baked into our culture, which I really appreciate. So that is about looking at either a kiddo in your programs or someone that you're working with here at the office. And when you see that something is not going the way that maybe it should, you start thinking about where can I put them in a place where they're strong, or where can I use the strength of theirs to help move us forward, instead of just looking at what do you need to work on? What are you not good at? And you need to get better about it, which is gonna go better and which is gonna feel better on the receiving end.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that doesn't mean that we don't provide feedback or that we don't notice there might be room for a different approach or to try things differently. But what we're looking for is, even when there's something that's not quite effective or efficient, something that's not appropriate to the environment, we're looking instead of labeling and considering this behavior to be the only thing we need to know about this person, that there might be some other set of skills that we can tap into, right? So looking at the strengths brought to us and even being open enough to say that even the misbehaviors, quote unquote, are still rooted in characteristics that we could leverage toward this person's goals and their own growth. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've heard you say a lot is connection before correction. So how does that relate to treasure hunting?
Oh, man. So the way I heard this phrase the first time, I was listening to a parent talking about her kiddo was on the couch playing a video game, and she called out from the kitchen, to do this thing. And he went, yeah, whatever. And in that moment, she could have just corrected him and said, hey, don't talk to me like that. Go clean your room, or whatever she was asking him to do. Or she could come sit down next to him and figure out what's actually going on. So luckily in that moment, she made the decision to sit down next to him and ask some questions and just talk to him on a human being level and find out why are you stressed, first of all? And then second of all, where can we compromise? So he just needed to finish his level of his video game and then go clean his room. And because she took that time to connect with him, they were able to reach that rather quickly instead of just upsetting each other and having the sort of blow up moment that can happen when you're working with kids. So similarly in our program, you might have a young person who is not following instructions. And in that moment, you can take a second and think about providing options or asking questions instead of just, what's wrong with you? Why won't you paint today?
Yep. So that is about recognizing that we have some care and there's obligation. Sure, we should care for this person that's in front of us, that's around us, but also we're likely in a place where we want to see their growth. We want to see them do well. And so that connection is to realize, even despite this disconnection, this moment we're having of difficult behavior, I still care about you, and I want what's best for the environment and for you. And how do I engage with that before coming at it like what you're saying, this sense that what's wrong with you, that there's, again, this list of things in which you're not measuring up. So connection before correction is an important part of what we do and say around here.
Every time you donate to Free Arts, something amazing happens. How? Let's paint a picture. Each penny we receive helps us deliver trauma-informed arts programs in a safe space where children can express themselves. We partner with more than 40 different child welfare agencies, a community that reaches over 17,000 children annually. So when you give, you help us turn trauma into resilience. Visit freeartsaz.org to donate and transform countless lives today.
And then I think that another major difference is that it's appropriate for us to name the skills and talents, the behaviors that we're seeing in the person. Often, they might be hearing that kind of praise for the first time.
Yeah.
So what does that look like, and how powerful is that for people?
This is the part of training where I normally tell people that I'm getting on a soapbox.
Okay, get on the soapbox.
Yes, I'm on it. So I think the most important thing you can do as a treasure hunter is tell someone when you have found a treasure. Because as you said, if you're living in an environment where you're often perceived as negative, or you're perceived as hyperactive, or any of those labels, you might not be hearing that you're also a leader, or that your brain just works really fast. You might start thinking rather poorly about yourself. As you mentioned earlier, that feeling of feeling trapped, or just am I even a good person? So just reminding kiddos that they are worthy of love and respect is not always enough. Sometimes it's good to point out the specific characteristics that they may not have known that they carried, because knowing that, they can also start using those strengths.
Yes. So it's part of the human experience to kind of have this ongoing, slightly harsh narrative taking place. And then people who've been through adversities and traumas often have more narrative and maybe even examples of moments that have made them even feel that these aren't just thoughts. This is really a true negative statement about me. Mm-hmm. And so taking those moments to call out what you see, provide some counter evidence.
Yeah.
And in some ways, we hope the constant experience that is what brings joy to the people that we're working with. So we're going to start with some basic stuff. How does this fit in language? How do we talk about it? How do we even just bring it up? Then in a moment, we're going to talk about some real life scenarios with moments in programs. But at a basic level, how does treasure hunting start for somebody? So let's say we're a new mentor. We've just heard about this. What does this mean? What does it sound like?
Yeah, I think it sounds like the minute that one of those difficult moments comes up, taking a second to pause and start to yourself thinking about what's actually underneath that. I'll use an example from a long time ago. I was in a different role with a different coworker, and they were expressing some really intense thoughts and feelings about a project that we were working on, and I had to sit there and I had to think about it for a minute. But I was able to come to the conclusion that this person just really cares about the project that we're working on, and they have a really deep sense of responsibility. And sometimes that manifests in feeling like you need to do it yourself or you need to do it in a specific way. But that allowed me to shift my thinking about that person and about the situation. It allowed me to calm down a little bit, and then we could start working together a little bit differently on a solution.
Yeah, I like that because you're noticing that the behavior might not be, it's the kind of thing that in the wrong setup at work could cause bigger conflict.
Yeah, tension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And instead, you took a moment to realize there's a certain thing about you that's important, that is showing up in this work. It's this sense of responsibility. It's very strong for you. And that helped you kind of put a different lens on the behavior you were seeing. Like, you're motivated to act in this way because of this strong sense of responsibility. How does that responsibility show up to the project? How do we discuss what's important there? Because that's a legitimate human need they have.
Yeah. And a strong sense of responsibility isn't inherently a bad thing. We just have to figure out how to guide that a little bit.
Yeah, and naming it is often the most important thing because without naming it, to say, like, I'm bringing into this exchange this strong sense of responsibility, people tend to think somebody's hard to understand behavior is about them.
Yes. It's
So,
easy
like,
to take
you
that
don't
personally.
like me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so in that way, treasure hunting starts a process. It's modeled by the adult
Yes.
of depersonalizing behavior, like being able to see that, like, despite all of what's happening here, this behavior is not about me as a person. It's not necessarily, even though it might even be worded as, I'm here to challenge your authority and your
Right.
leadership and like, rah, rah, rah. It's an expression of some other human needs that can find a different channel to be expressed and met, but they're still legitimate needs. I think there's another part here where we have an opportunity at the very beginning of treasure hunting. It's very easy to make a list of the challenges that anything is happening, the environment, this project, this space, this event, this day. Here's my list of things that are wrong with it, and not give any space to the triumphs, the things that are happening. The fact that for some experiences of our participants, being there today, getting here,
Yeah.
is a triumph.
That definition of success is a little subjective, for sure.
And that was a big part of helping people understand the original Kids at Hope dialogue was they're capable of success. And we tend, as a society, think that means, graduate and get a job and do all these adulty kind of things. There's nothing wrong with that. But those don't necessarily on their own make people that happy. Like, yay, I've become a rule follower. It's usually not on one of those inspiration posters, right? It's the expression of their own like sense of values and meanings that tends to add the context and color to people's lives. So even when we think about Kids at Hope and what it means to be a success, it means there's giving room for what this young person is going to create as their own definition of that. What does it look like to be successful? And so it's weird. I don't think we even use success a lot in expressive arts, but what would you even say, Beth, are the things that might make a success out of an experience with the art programs at Free Arts?
Yeah, I think the word I use when I'm talking to children or to mentors is silver lining. I don't know that that's a Free Arts phrase so much as a Beth one, but
It is now. Yeah.
Write it in the training. No, the silver linings are, like you said, showing up that day can be a silver lining. Participating instead of just sitting in the corner, or like sometimes the silver lining is you've said hello back to me instead of just rolling your eyes at me. So they can be tiny, and sometimes they can be much bigger. I interviewed a mentor this week who said his favorite moments in working with kids is when you have kiddos in the beginning who are absolutely not going to get in the water at the pool. They're just not interested in participating. They don't really want to react to hanging out with you. But by the end of your summer together, you can't get them out of the water. And sometimes those are really big silver linings. Yeah.
Yep. Process.
Yes.
Process. Yep. Being fully present for the environment. Okay, so that's the basics. That's getting us started. And that's often where we're talking in training volunteers and mentors. Some in the social services field, like they get it, they know this, they've heard it before. And others, they're much more attuned to like the general social cultural way we relate, which is let's make a list of what's wrong with our neighbors, right? Like this is the things we don't like. So it can be more challenging for people to get into this gear. But trust us, it's easy to do if you give it some practice. So on that note, we have a couple scenarios that are inspired by. The names have been changed to protect the
names
innocent.
Names and ages.
Yeah, inspired by real interactions at Free Arts. So walk us through the first one, Beth.
Sure. The first one is actually one that comes up in our training. So if you get to go to it, pretend you haven't heard this one before. But Jessie is a 14-year-old, and she comes to a mentor group every week, but she has a scowl on her face. Usually she doesn't want to participate at all, and then 15 minutes in, she starts making art, but it is not the project that you planned. She makes a lot of negative comments, and it usually gets all of the other girls in her group home to also start being negative. And one time she told you that she wanted to be a backup dancer for Beyonce. So when you're handed that scenario, what are the treasures?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're present and we're doing art.
Yes.
We're expressing some art. That's
we come
important
every
to us.
week.
Yes,
yeah.
we're there attending every week. That if it appears that she has a value for creativity, both in her future goal and the fact that even in the environment, she's taking her own path, but still being creative. Mm-hmm. And so treasure hunting there could also start to look like, what do we do to draw her in to have the best experience? This is the choice. Mm-hmm. Is success everybody in the space did the same piece the same way,
yeah.
right? So, what other things do you recommend about somebody who's experiencing that? Like, how does treasure hunting draw out more from Jessie?
Yeah, good question. I would say in that moment, when she tells you that she wants to be a backup dancer, say that you're really excited that she has a goal. That's wonderful. And then start asking her if she maybe wants to do a dance-oriented project next week. Maybe that will make her a little more invested. You can also, in that moment, when you're watching her rally the other girls in the group home to be negative, you might be able to use that strength for something positive and say, why don't you lead that dance activity for next week?
Yep.
Kind of funnel that energy into something positive. And then I also think you have an opportunity to later ask the adults in her life, what is she doing before this that is making it so difficult for her to transition into your group and figure out what that need is.
Yeah, excellent point. Because again, like we can walk around, you can go to the grocery store and have the weirdest interaction with somebody, and you're like, what was that all about? Mm-hmm. And if you had the ability to follow them throughout the day or the preceding moments, you might have a whole different take on what has occurred here, because maybe what you're seeing is, out of places that might feel makes a lot of sense given what they've just been through, right? And so it's real that some of our participants might have just come from a family court hearing and now they're in the program. They might have come from therapy that was difficult and now they're in the program. Who knows what happens at school? Everybody's had the up days and the down days. So yes, that immediate context here. And it's not always our job in the moment to draw it out of the kid.
Right.
Your suggestion was find out more aside from the moment, because we don't want to put kids on the spot to defend their behavior. And often even we are not aware of how hungry we are, sleepy we are, all these other kind of biological things are driving our behavior.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? We know if you take a survey and you've been given cold drinks, people are generally nicer. And if they're hot drinks, they're a little meaner. And we're just primed neurologically by our environment in real subtle ways. So that's great. So that's Jessie. Take us to the next one.
All right. So let's say you've got a 9-year-old. His name is Jason. And Jason's at camp with us, and he's known as being a little bit of a bully by his group home peers and also his staff. He picks a lot of fights, both verbal and physical. He makes loud jokes at inappropriate times. When the photographer at camp, he is wedging his way into every photo possible with the little peace sign. Yeah.
Well, at least it's the peace sign.
Yeah, it could be worse.
I would start there. Like, we could use these photos.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they make other signs, and that's not it. But yeah, I think with Jason, like, clearly there's a need for attention.
Right.
Try to find a comedian that doesn't need attention, right?
Truly.
Professional ones, like, they're usually this combination of people that have needed a lot of attention and often have a lot of heartache, which is what kind of drives the need to entertain, unfortunately. But I think that is also, it is like the sense of humor is its own form of creativity.
Yeah.
Right? It is its own expression. Wanting to be in the photo is one of the, more helpful things about being in a group when it's time.
That's true.
Yeah. And then connection, right?
Yeah.
How do we understand what's important to him? Why is he coming? How do we incorporate that sense of humor, that need to have some attention? How do we even model to him, how do we share this attention? Can it move around in the moment, right?
Yeah.
These are things that we can do to work with somebody here. And these behaviors are really sending out pretty strong signals that I'm afraid to be missed.
Absolutely.
Yep. Third one.
All right. This is Noah. Noah's 10 years old, and he's a very active child. He is always pushing buttons on elevators and picking up phones and asking, what does this do? He is more interested in taking your art supplies apart than he is in creating anything. He has trouble sitting still, and he asks questions when you would rather be explaining your project or doing the rest of the program.
Yeah, and part of the behavior here, depending on our age, is totally age appropriate.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
I want to play with things. I want to see how they work.
Yeah.
And there are some spaces where creativity begins with deconstructing a thing in order to recreate it. So how do we use that energy that way? And then it's pretty clear, and we can praise this out, that if they are constantly shifting between things mentally, like they're often a fast processor. I'm not trying to say that makes them smarter than other people, but fast processing often requires a little more stimulation. So
definitely,
what are the things that have lights and sounds that will give that kind of feedback and that this person would want to engage in, right? So these are things that can help us. And then, I used to call them show up kids in other youth work, where it's like, we told them we're cleaning up the dirt lot behind and they're there, right? They just want to be part of the group. So when that energy's there, like, how do we allow them to help us set up the activity, help us to clean up the activity? They want to move, they want to touch, they want to do these things. We're not going to go clean the abandoned lot with them. That was an example. It's not an expressive art, exactly. But how do we use them within the environment here to express some of that energy in a way that benefits the whole group and keeps them active, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of these are seeing that there's part of the presentation that's age appropriate, that is specific to this person's context, what they've been through. It's a basis of their personality. And then even beside what might be viewed as a troublesome behavior or distracting behavior, there's actually something about them that is good, that is true, that is powerful, that we can call out and that we can call out into the space, right? Okay, so how do people practice? This is our last thing that we want to cover today. How do people practice? So when we present this to new people, right, good learning theory says you get a new skill. If you could put it into practice in the next couple of days, there's a better chance of retention. So that often means when we're training adults on this for the first time, they're not likely to mentor that afternoon. So that means going back to real life examples. Like, who do you know in your life that you can try this on? So if you were to think about some real life examples, you might, with young people, you might look for the interactions and think through, how do I select activities that match the ways they kind of prefer to interact? Are they the gamer? Are they noisy? Are they need body movement? Do we need to create space to do these things? Are they more pensive, thoughtful? They want to write poems and read books. Like that's more my vibe, right? Where's the hot tea and the chill out? But other people are wired differently. And how do we recognize that these are not good versus bad? These are expressions of who they are as people and how we can work at those. So that's what I would say if we're working with young people. But it's the chances are many of our mentors and volunteers are hearing about this, and they're going to engage with other adults, right? And so whether that's a partner, spouse, relationship, or peers, how do you listen for the interests and values this person is bringing? So back to your work example of like that person's tension around the project was them expressing this need to feel and carry out responsibility. So treasure hunting is drawing out that listening. Tell me more about that. Tell me why that's important. Having really open-ended questioning so that the adult can kind of explain it. It's harder for children to tell often what their motivation is. It also can be a challenge for some adults, depending on the scenario. Like, I don't know why I don't like this as much as I do. But what's important to us, these are things we can listen to and know and validate and call out. And even when there's this kind of disruptive moment, we can notice that somebody is really trying to express a core need to us, right? So fear is that North Star of attunement. So these feelings that motivate behavior that come from feeling disconnected or fearful, they're telling us what feels like home and what feels like safe, and we can turn that into language if we're willing to talk about it. So last thought for here, we have some kind of program truisms, statements that we say. How do we put this into practice in the program? So what do you think here as someone's getting involved at Free Arts? How would they see it in the program? How could they make it part of who they are?
Good question. I think practice is super important. So practicing it at home in addition to when they're walking in to mentor for the first time. Remembering that we're looking at the whole person and not just the behavior that we're handed. And then remembering that everybody's voice matters and that we have to provide as much space as possible to everybody.
Yep. Voices matter. We want your input. We want to interact with that. We want to meet you where you are with that. And this is why we intentionally, we have boundaries. You can't hurt people. You can't be hurtful in Free Arts. We will address those things, but we want to create a space here where this experience is not driven by us and we're not necessarily taking a punishment first reaction to things that are unexpected, that we work with the feelings and thoughts and wants of the group that we're with, and that their voice matters because often it's an audience that really has limited choices, right? They might be in out-of-home care. They're not in familiar spaces. They might not have any control over who they're living with. And that might be a full extension of what their day has been like. When you think about tables, chairs, desks, school, bells ringing all day long, it's I have to be following someone else's agenda for my life. And in this moment here, how do we get your voice involved in what we're doing? And then finally, it's a cue for us here that we want to accept you on the basis of your essential human dignity, and that we want to work with what skills you have in order to move forward toward growth, toward things that matter to you. And that's what treasure hunting's about. How was your three-peat?
It was pretty good. I had a great time.
All right. Excellent. Well, thanks for being on, Beth. And again, check out our episodes, Canvas of the Heart. If you haven't yet, share it with those that you care about and know would love Free Arts. Like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Canvas of the Heart. We'd love to hear your questions and feedback by email at hello@freeartsaz.org. You can find more information about Free Arts by visiting our website at freeartsaz.org. We'd like to thank the many individual and corporate donors and the hundreds of volunteers that make Free Arts programs possible. Take care, and we will talk to you soon.